known to be one of the sharpest guys in the world when it comes to pro wrestling. I'm also sure that he'll try to snow us at least a couple of times. Is that true, Paul?
Definitely.
Okay, well, let's see if you're going to start the snow job right away. Let's talk about the man that was the driving force, I think, behind your company for a lot of years. And his name, of course, is Stone Cold Steve Austin. You may be one of the guys that actually found him way back when. Why did he leave the company? And is it true that he left because he would not do a work that he would not lay down for Brock Lesnar?
I think it had a lot more to do with whether Stone Cold Steve Austin wanted to work with Brock Lesnar or not. It was brewing for a long time, and Austin was clearly getting very pissed off. And Steve is a guy that's made a lot of money, and he made enough money now where I think he could probably live off the interest for the rest of his life and never touch the principal. And that's a dangerous guy to do business with because he has the ability one day to say, screw you, I'm going home. And
which he did, right?
Which is exactly what he did.
Now, he had a sense that he was going to be phased out, phased down. Was that a legitimate fear that he had?
I don't think so. I don't think so, but I don't know really what prompted Steve to walk out. I don't know what really happened, and I don't think anybody really knows besides Steve and Vince McMahon.
He was unhappy with the booking, I think. I think that's a fair conclusion. That may not have been the whole story, but he didn't like the way things were evolving with his character. He didn't like NWO.
Clearly didn't like a lot of things about the company. And Steve also was frustrated with communication. And Steve was also frustrated with a lot of things involving the usage of his wife, Deborah. He just was very, very frustrated. And he wasn't getting satisfaction with his concerns. His concerns were not being assuaged to his satisfaction, to the point where one day he was flying to Atlanta. He got into Atlanta and he said, you know what? I'm going home. I don't want this. I don't need this. And I think also it had a lot to do with the dynamic between Steve and Vince McMahon, because Vince loves confrontation. If Vince were on your show,
and he has been many times,
this is how Vince would be.
Right.
Vince enjoys the spirit of confrontation. And Steve didn't give Vince the one thing that I think Vince would want if Steve were to walk out, which is the right to say, screw you, goodbye, or hey, let's work this out. But Vince never had the chance to say either one of those to Steve because Steve simply took his ball.
Yeah, but did Vince blow it? When I say Vince, I mean the WWE, because the company has struggled in a lot of levels right now, and he is a huge money guy, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Did they not do enough to keep him happy?
It's a double-edged sword here because I don't know if maybe that character needed some time off. I mean, that was a real strong character that had a lot of crazy things to do. And once you do all these wild, crazy
but you know
things,
what? I got to say, Paul, that the company doesn't have a lot of stars. You had The Rock and you had Stone Cold, and now without those guys, the company is not as strong as it was before. So I think you got to look back and say, you know what? We should have kept the guy happy, even if he was a pain in the ass, and even if he was making unfair demands. I mean, sports teams do that all the time. They acquiesce to the guys that they know make them the money.
But you see, I can't tell you that Steve was a pain in the ass because he was never a pain in the ass to me, and I did a lot. When Steve was doing the what, beer, what, cerveza, what, a lot of the what stuff I worked with Steve on. Not exclusively, I was one of many that did, but I never had a problem with Steve. I never found him to be a pain in the ass, and I never found him to be demanding, and I don't know if his concerns were unwarranted, and I don't know if he was out of line, because I never found him to be myself. I think, again, the situation here was that here was a character that had a 4 or 5 year run. Where do you go with the character at that time? And sometimes it's very hard for a company, especially a company that has such a loyal audience, to say, we're going to put this character on the shelf for 6 months because it needs to be freshened up.
So you have huge credibility when you talk about that because you are the head writer on SmackDown.
Well, I'm the lead writer.
Okay.
The head writer is Vince McMahon.
Okay, well, you know what? We'll talk about that and the relationship between the lead writer and the head writer in a second. But I want to stay on the Stone Cold thing because you're talking about characters. Triple H said on a show that you have, Confidential, that he would not bring back Stone Cold to the WWE because he could not be trusted. Do you agree with that? Would you bring him back? Because personally, I think it's going to happen. It's only inevitable. But what do you think?
Well, it depends on your perspective. And I own my own company for 7 years. And ECW. And I excuse my language, I swallowed a lot of because it was right for business to swallow. And Vince McMahon, to his ultimate credit, will put his ego and his personal conflicts with a man aside if it's right for business. If Bret Hart was right for business to bring back, he would bring Bret Hart back like that. It's Stone Cold Steve Austin, who pissed Vince off by walking out there. There is no greater insult to Vince than to walk out on Vince and not even say goodbye or not even say, screw you, I'm walking out on
Because
you.
when Brett left after the Survivor Series, he had that. He had heat that he could build on. He could vilify himself, which he did ultimately. But what you're saying is Stone Cold left the wrong way, which was the quiet way.
No, I don't know if it's the wrong way. It was
According to Vince.
It was the most insulting. I think Steve knew what he was doing. I don't think it was a temper tantrum.
But you're the master of the storylines. I got to say, and you always deflect. When I met you, I said, you know, it's great to see you. You're going to be great. And you said, you know, why? I mean, you're all about that. But the truth is, you understand what the wrestling fans want. Do they want Stone Cold right now?
Yes. And if they are willing to pay to see him, I think Vince would have him back in a heartbeat.
So why don't they want Rock then? Because the value of Rocky to the company has clearly been lessened by his association with Hollywood. Do they just not see him as one of theirs anymore?
Yes. I think that's... But then again, that also makes a great heel. I mean, if The Rock were to come out and start talking about how he's only here for a couple of days because he's so busy to film his next movie, and he really doesn't have a lot of time to share with you fans today because The Rock has to go do his movie.
Because you understand the fan fanaticism, because that's what ECW was built on, right?
Totally.
And you were all built on guys who had sold out, right? Because is it not true that the crowd would chant, you sold out, when they learned that guys were going from ECW to WWF at the time?
We had a real cult following that was very passionate about our product.
Right, and you understand that. So, and they perceive now, right, that Rock has sold out because he's gone mainstream, right? And that's hard to get back, isn't it?
Well, but then again, that's also a great marketing thing for Rock. I mean, if The Rock were to come back as a babyface, I think he'd have a problem. Except for the first night. First time they see him, they're going to, oh, thank God he's back. We love him. He's the savior. And then it's, but he's going to do a movie. But that makes such a great heel. Because The Rock then, and he's an articulate guy, can talk down to the audience. And once he starts talking down to the audience and starts reminding them how big he is and how much of a movie star he is and how much money he makes and his lifestyle.
I'm loving this. He's Paul Heyman. He is the lead writer from SmackDown, not to be confused with the head writer. And is there confusion between lead and head writer? We'll talk about that when OTR returns. A successful independent wrestler, wrestling league. You were the renegade. You were the guy that created a lot of the stuff that the WWF did back in '97 when they turned to sex, when they turned to violent, more cutting-edge storylines. Now you are the, as you pointed out, lead writer for SmackDown, one of the properties of WWE. You say that Vince is the head writer.
He is.
Yeah. Final say?
Oh, on everything.
Can you win an argument with him?
Of course, because he's very open to it. And I've lost a lot of arguments to him, too, but I don't know. See, I like arguing with Vince. I don't know if he likes arguing with me, but I like it because I learn from him a lot.
What are your arguments about largely? Because again, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that ECW, you guys did push the envelope, right? Which ultimately was what the WWF did, which wrestled back some of the audience from WCW that the company then went public for $1 billion. So you kind of had the ideas before them. But now they're, to me, a lot more conservative. You got a board of directors. This company is a public company. Do you push Vince to push the envelope?
No.
Why not?
Because I don't know if pushing the envelope is the answer right now. I would venture to say that everybody who's on the writing staff has a much different view than the other guy. If I have the same view as this guy, there's no reason to have both of us on staff. You're wasting money. It benefits the company to have me and have somebody else that views things in a different way and have another kid that views things a different way than both of us. And Vince then, much like, and I don't know what the equivalent is here in Canada, but in the United States, you have the president. The president will have, the Secretary of Defense and have the Secretary of State and have another advisor, and he says, okay, here's our plan. We're gonna go invade Mexico. Okay, well, Mr. President, don't invade Mexico because the peso will drop and it'll kill the economy.
Right.
And then another guy says, yeah, let's invade Mexico because we'll look strong to everybody else. And the president takes all the information and says,
right. But the president of the WWE is a very different guy than he was 10 years ago because now he's a public company.
Right.
Are the hands of this company tied to some extent because it's more corporate now, creatively? Is it more difficult to push the envelope than it was maybe in 97, 98.
I don't think so, because if Vince wanted to push the envelope, he would push the envelope, and anybody who didn't want to go along with him could jump off anytime they wanted to. He is a...
Can you say that, though, when you got a board of directors, when you got investors? Because it's not just you. It used to be a family company. Now there's a whole lot of people that got a whole lot of money invested, and these are guys that wear suits and ties. These are not necessarily the traditional wrestling fans.
I think that's a real misconception of what the board of directors of the WWE would be about, because anybody who is involved in this company, especially on an investment standpoint, better believe in the vision of Vince McMahon, or I don't know what they're investing in.
So, Paul, how does the storyline, how does the writing transpire? It comes from up here. Do you sit in a room and all of a sudden you kick out ideas and then you churn out the final product? How does it happen?
Well, it's a constant brainstorming session. You certainly want the input of the talent. The talent is a key thing nowadays, because if the talent is into it, they can really make it happen. So you solicit the opinion of the talent. You solicit the opinion of guys like Pat Patterson and Jack Lanza and these old school guys who have been with the company for many, many, many years. And then you have writers, and most of the, I think, with the exception of Michael Hayes, I'm the oldest writer on, Bruce Pritchard too, but I'm the oldest writer on staff. And you have these young writers who try to keep their finger on the pulse today, and everybody brainstorms these ideas. Now, what the lead writer will do is really... And
that's you.
Well, on SmackDown I am.
Right.
And that's really, to me, it just means I'm the go-to guy. It just means I coordinate these ideas that the SmackDown team will have, and I get them down into pitches. And then we get in front of Vince, and we pitch them. And some ideas he likes, and some ideas he hates. And some ideas that he likes, he says, well, let's change it to do this, or let's refine it to do... It's the constant state of refinement in these storylines. You're always making them better, 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 better. And stuff that he doesn't like, at least he'll hear your argument. And there have been stuff that he hated that we sit there and say, but Vince, look at it from this perspective. And he sits there and he says, well, okay, I understand that. Let's try it out. And there's other things that he doesn't like that he doesn't want to go with.
The other side, Triple H and Stephanie, how much influence do those two have on the final product of Raw?
It depends on what ideas they pitch to Vince. And if Vince likes the ideas. I mean, Vince is the final say. Vince is the Supreme Court. And nothing happens on the show without Vince blessing it. So if it's on the show, it's real simple in that company. If the company does well, Vince deserves all the credit. And if the company doesn't, he'll take all the blame. He'll take it right on the chin. I mean, make no mistake about it. He will take the blame, and he does deserve the credit. Triple H,
Stephanie, is there a conflict because of, I mean, first of all, Stephanie's Vince's daughter, and she has an influential role in the writing of that show, and Triple H, of course, is a key participant in that. Because wearing too many hats can screw up a company.
You'd have to ask Vince that. I don't know how much Triple H and Stephanie have more influence than anybody else. And being Vince's daughter is both a benefit to Stephanie and it's a hardship to Stephanie, because he demands more out of her. He expects more out of her. She's a McMahon. She has learned at the feet of the master for 26 years, and he expects more out of her than he does anybody else.
So you got an easy job then, because you're not a McMahon, right? So he doesn't expect much from you. So you can mail it in, right, Paul?
I usually do, yes.
Yeah, okay.
At least my critics will say so.
More OTR with Paul Heyman, the lead writer from SmackDown, and also, of course, he assumes a role as a manager for The Big Show. We'll talk
I'm an
more.
agent now.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
What's the announcement?
Well, you got to wait like everybody else. It's a one-on-one interview with someone as big as you. Hey, this is a promo. Stay tuned. Later on in the show, you will find out about the biggest wrestling announcement maybe ever, but you'll have to wait for it. How was that? What was the camera I was talking to? Oh, you want to see if it was written? It wasn't written down.
I want to know what it is.
Okay, well, you'll have to wait. Eric Bischoff, when you were ECW, when you were running your company, he gave you no respect. Now you got to work with him. Is that hard, and how much do you not like him?
I hated his guts. He was brutal to ECW. Brutal. I don't know if there was anybody in the industry that I disliked more than Eric Bischoff.
And what's it like working with him now?
Fine.
Why?
Because he's hungry. He wants to advance.
And he was humbled, right? I mean, he came, well, if he wasn't humbled, then he's delusional, right? Because things fell apart for him.
You know what? I think anytime you get your ass kicked, it humbles you. And I think it's a good thing sometimes to get your ass kicked, especially in business.
And you probably enjoyed when he got his ass kicked in business, right?
I really didn't care because I was getting my ass kicked at the same time. So I really wasn't paying much attention to him getting his ass kicked. Hey, you know, it's different now because to me, ECW grudges died with ECW. So when I came aboard WWE, it was under the guise of clean slate.
Right.
You know, everything starts from zero.
ECW, one of the things that you had to do was you had to find new talent, right? You couldn't go to WWF and buy them away. You saw some great young talent. When you saw Chris Jericho for the first time, what did you think?
Blew me away.
Really?
He blew me away. Actually, Jericho was recommended to me by Chris Benoit. And Benoit told me, hey, there's a kid, man. He's going to be such a star, and just get in on the ground floor with this guy. And I'd seen a tape of Jericho against Ultimo Dragon from Japan. And as soon as I saw the tape, I started seeking out his phone number because I knew this guy could be a star.
Did he get a fair job, a fair shot at WWE at the top dog spot?
I don't know. I don't know because I don't know.
And by that you mean I think I'll take a pass.
No, I really don't know because there was a lot of things going on when Jericho was champion. You're talking about a time when Austin was pissed off. You're talking about the time that the NWO came in. There was a lot of things going on at that time. There's a lot of circumstances that are not examined when you just say, well, was Jericho given a shot as champion, or is Jericho not given a shot as champion? I don't know. I mean,
how about Rob Van Dam? I mean, to me, he could be the biggest star that your company has, certainly in Raw, but he has not achieved that. Why?
Because at this point in time, the strengths of Rob Van Dam are not as apparent sometimes to this company as they were to me. Because in ECW, I had a real luxury that it's not afforded here in WWE, in that I could go out of my way to hide people's flaws and go out of my way to accentuate their strengths and sometimes lead them by the hand, because that's what a writer, a booker, a director, a producer does, in my opinion. And I had the opportunity to take some of these guys and lead them by the hand. And a guy that was good looked great, and a guy that was great looked like the greatest.
Right. Now, you don't write for Rob Van Dam because he's in Raw. What would you do if you had him now?
Rob?
With Rob.
I personally would accentuate his matches more than almost anything else, and I would put Rob in situations that demonstrate just what a tough son of a bitch that he is, because Rob's passion comes out in the ring. Rob's passion comes out in the fact that he can take a real ass-kicking and yet still connect with the audience with a mere look, and then he hits the double thumb.
I asked Taker who was a disappointment to him, Mark Calloway, and he said Big Show.
At the time, that was very accurate.
Yeah, he was talking about a guy who has so much potential and who has never really achieved that. Who's that guy for you? Who could do more with what they got? And it's not really an insult to say it, because you're almost admitting that a guy's got some potential.
I don't really know. And I'm not trying to take a pass on the question. I don't really know, because it's such a whirlwind in WWE that either you're scoring or you're left behind. I mean, it happens like that.
Okay, I got to throw you a softball because that's tough. Softball, who's the most underrated? Who do you see as is ready to explode, who's got huge talent?
Booker T and Rob Van Dam.
Okay.
Big time.
On that note, we go to break. You know, when the softballs start to come, we're going to break.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, we'll cut it out. That's why we edit after the show. Just kidding. Well, let us know your thoughts on the guests. This one is for you, Paul. Have you read Hulk's book yet? What do you think? Is he on the level? Have you read the book?
No.
Well, then, you know what? Probably the being on the level, not necessarily relevant. We'll talk about there's a reason why it's phenomenally successful, and I think that Paul Heyman is one of the reasons why. Incredibly creative with the storylines, with SmackDown. Thanks very much for joining us. This was a total pleasure for me.
You've been severely misled.
You know what? Tell me about Hulk Hogan. Let's get back to it. Is there real heat between he and Vince? Do they not see eye to eye?
I feel like Humphrey Bogart and the Kane Mutiny with this thing. I'm sure they don't see eye to eye right now. I'm sure they don't, and there's a lot of reasons why.
And I can ask him myself, because the big announcement is that Hulk Hogan, I think for one of the first times in his career, will do a sit-down, actually 2 1/2-hour shows with us, no holds barred, ask him anything. That is coming up in the very near future. We're still trying to determine exactly what the dates are. Hulk Hogan, one-on-one on OTR. How cool is that?
Who are you talking to?
I'm talking to the camera. Oh, you didn't know this was on the air. Maybe that's why you were so candid.
Oh, we're rolling?
Yeah, we are. Let me ask you some word association. We do that with wrestling guys like you.
With wrestling guys like
yeah,
me?
absolutely.
It's okay, I'll do my best for you.
Jim Cornette. What do you think of him?
Who wrote these questions for you?
Apparently.
We've never seen eye to eye.
Right. Well, what am I going to throw it like your mom? You know, I mean, like let's be a little more challenging than that. Jim Ross.
interesting guy. Jim Ross gave me my first break as a color commentator, and really taught me the skill.
And he
of
fired
announcing.
you as well, right?
No, Jim Ross never.
He
fired
fired you from WCW.
No, he did
Why
not.
are you lying to me,
no,
Paul
I'm not
Heyman?
lying to you. Bill Watts, you got to get your facts straight. Bill Watts fired me.
Yeah, but I know because JR told me secretly he was pulling the strings to get you fired.
Could I have that tape,
No,
please?
no, he didn't tell me that. I just didn't like to be proven wrong. I made that up, right?
Son of a bitch.
Absolutely. Jerry Lawler, because he was pretty harsh on you, Bingo Hall boy.
Well, I'm sure he was very harsh on me. After all, I took his spot and did better than he did.
Jerry Lawler.
Jerry, I think I just answered.
Okay. Ric Flair.
Ric Flair is a legend who has a love for this business and a love for being in the ring, even at the, I don't know if Ric's 51 or 53, but I mean, Ric loves to get
Last
into
word,
the ring.
one line, only have time for this, Bret Hart.
A tragic story.
You know what? He's the guy that more than anything, I'd love to get him on this show. We're trying. You know what? This was a total pleasure.